Fuck, I hope I can get this out on time. Guess we'll see how this ages. Alright, so it has been a couple months since the Wave 2 anniversary, and we finally hit the anniversary of another BCP wave. This time around, we'll be talking about Wave 6, the final wave of the pass. This is an interesting one, because not only is it the conclusion to the Booster Course Pass, but this wave was also tasked with wrapping up Mario Kart 8 as a whole, since I'm pretty damn positive that a new game is what's next for the series. Going in, this was probably the wave we knew the most about compared to most of the previous 5, the only exception being Wave 3, which I'll get into that next time. Funnily enough, this had less to do with data mines and more to do with general logic. Of course, there was the prefix data mine from Wave 1, and after Wave 5, we were left with 2 Tour City tracks, a SNES track, a Wii track, 2 GameCube tracks, and 2 blank slots, which were generally being saved for non-city tour nitros, the only exception being Moonview Highway, which took one of the 3 blank slots initially reserved for Wave 6. Now, Moonview Highway actually played a key part in speculation at this point, since it was the first time in the BCP that a prefix was changed in any way. We now knew it was on the table for that to potentially happen again, and there was one slot being pointed at that may take that role, being one of the 2 GameCube slots. At this point, the only GameCube tracks left in Tour that hadn't made their way to 8 yet were Mushroom Bridge, DK Mountain, and Dino Dino Jungle. The last 2 of these share a music track, so it was reasonable to assume it was a one or the other kind of situation, especially if we're talking about within the same wave. Mushroom Bridge, on the other hand, is a very simple track, even sharing its shape with SNES Mario Circuit 1. Combine this with the fact that it comes from a flower cup, and it seemed like it would be a very odd choice for them to add in the final wave, where the tracks are theoretically going to undergo somewhat of a difficulty spike. Not to mention, Moonview Highway seemingly replaced it, being another traffic course with a relatively simple layout. So we knew there was most likely a mystery slot to be filled in Wave 6, but for the remaining 7, it was pretty easy to assume. There were only 2 city tracks left in Tour as it was. Either of the 2 GameCube jungle tracks felt safe, and the Wii and SNES slots had pretty obvious picks considering what was left on Tour for each of them. There were also 2 non-city nitros left in Tour, accounting for the 2 blank slots. If you look at the Wave 6 predictions during this period, they're all more or less the same with very little variation. Hell, my own Wave 6 prediction video fell in line with most others. And we were right. Mostly. Wave 6's reveal process was interesting, to say the least. With most people unanimously agreeing on what the lineup will look like, it's only natural Nintendo would throw in a curveball or 2 to keep everyone on their toes. It is the finale wave, after all, so you definitely want to go out with a bang. Let's talk about the tracks themselves, though, and how exactly Nintendo threw us off to give us a memorable finale to the Booster Course Pass. As usual, we're going to talk about quite possibly the least surprising part of Wave 6's lineup first, being the city tracks. This time around, we have Rome Avanti and Madrid Drive. Meh. Now, I like these cities, Madrid especially, but as I said in the Wave 5 video, I just feel like the original Wave 6 pairing of Vancouver and Athens would have made for a better final pair of cities. I do get why they went this route though. When Wave 5 released, Madrid wasn't out yet in Tour, so they were never going to launch a city track in the BCP before Tour. Not to mention, it would have felt a little redundant to put both Athens and Rome within the same wave. Hell, Rome already felt redundant when it was announced for Tour to begin with. So I understand wanting to space them out. Plus, between the final 5 options, there were 2 nighttime city courses, so I do get wanting Vancouver and Rome to be split into separate waves. Don't even get me started on why making Wave 6 be the one with 3 cities instead would have been a bad idea, even with the best possible combinations. I do have my own theories about the late development of Tour and how that could have impacted the BCP, and I will touch on that deeper in another video. But regardless of what happened behind the scenes, the fact that Madrid came to tour after Wave 5 meant that some kind of shift had to have happened internally, leading to some kind of overall rebalance. No matter though, it is what it is, and all of these tracks are an 8 Deluxe now regardless. So as for the tracks themselves, Rome is definitely the weaker link. Aesthetically, it rules, and I love how it kind of feels like a mix of Paris with a little hint of Athens. It definitely has a very unique feel to it, like a lot of the later city tracks do, and there's some really cool set pieces involving the Colosseum that make me wish a little bit more of the track took place in the historical ruins kind of environment like this. As for the rest of the track, it's a bit of a mess, especially in lap 2. City tracks can be notorious for having confusing layouts, and the constant weaving through bits and pieces of roundabouts in this one makes for an especially confusing race, where for a portion at least, you're essentially relying on arrows and nothing else, which is very unintuitive. Hopefully, if this one's brought back in the future, they can add some tunnels or bridges or something to help mitigate this. That, or maybe rework the routing a little bit. Oh yeah, Chain Chomp Jump Scare. The other city track here is, appropriately enough, also Tour's final city track, being Madrid Drive. While I do think Athens would have been a great final city for the BCP, Madrid is a suitable alternative. On the surface, it definitely looks pretty standard for a city track, but I would argue that Madrid perfects the typical flat city format in a way a lot of the other city tracks earlier on largely missed the mark on. Like I said, it's relatively flat in the sense that there aren't really any crazy elevation changes like you would find in Athens or Singapore, but the difference here is that Madrid is constantly bombarding you with new interesting set pieces. There's a plaza with a wiggler that you pass through a couple times, as well as a marketplace, a gliding section over a pond, an art museum, and a football stadium. The last two are especially notable for featuring dynamic music changes. All of these elements together make for a consistently interesting dynamic city track where you can really feel the thought and love that was put into it. Madrid Drive is one of the best city tracks and allows for this aspect of the booster course pass to go out with a bang. Moving on to the real retros, the lineup here is pretty solid, though considering this is the final wave, there were definitely some questionable choices. As I said earlier, a lot of this wave was pretty predictable once Wave 5 released. Since there were 2 non-city tour tracks left with, conveniently, 2 blank slots left for Wave 6, it was reasonable to assume Piranha Plant Cove and Piranha Plant Pipeline were locked in. The first of these, Piranha Plant Cove, ends the Acorn Cup, and is definitely one of the more unique non-city tour nitros in that, while it isn't a city, it does use the 3-route format synonymous with the city tracks. That aside, how is Cove in 8 Deluxe? I think it's fun, though out of the non-city nitros, I think it wasn't quite the best one to end on, especially following up the god tier 1-2 punch of Yoshi's Island and Squeaky Clean Sprint. It's a neat underwater track with maybe a tiny bit too much of slowly falling from the surface, but the Petey Piranha theming is fun, and I do like the above water segments that break things up a bit. Also, any appearance of the moray eel is based as fuck. You know what else is based as fuck? Piranha Plant Pipeline! Too bad that's irrelevant. Yeah, so when I said earlier that Nintendo wanted to keep us on our toes still for Wave 6, they definitely succeeded. Until the full wave reveal, there was no reason to expect them not to bring over any of the tour original tracks. Hell, Waves 4 and 5 both got an extra city track slot each to ensure that all of those tracks were accounted for, so it was very reasonable to assume Wave 6 was doing the same, just with an extra prefix-less nitro instead of an extra city. Instead, Nintendo opted to have 2 wild cards, one taking the mystery slot left by the extra GameCube track, and one now taking the place of Pipeline. I'm going to talk about these in the order that they were revealed, as the first track, Wee Daisy Circuit, was revealed in the September 2023 Nintendo Direct. I have to say, this might be the only time I actively questioned a decision made for the Booster Course Pass. For one, at the time, it was weird to me that they were already showing off the mystery track instead of saving that reveal for the Wave 6 trailer. It would have been a lot more in line with previous direct reveals for the BCP that they showed off Cove and or Pipeline instead. For another, why Daisy Circuit of all tracks? Moonview was a very nice surprise to Wave 5, but it did create a sort of Wii track fatigue since there was no reason the Wii track everyone and their mother knew would come to Wave 6 was going to be replaced. Not to mention, though it is one of the most unique circuits in the series to a point where the circuit name almost doesn't feel appropriate for it, it is still a circuit, and felt like a bit of a weird track to put in the final wave. Like, if I'm being honest, between the two Wii tracks that would have been left over in Tour, I think that if they just had to go for two Wii tracks in Wave 6, Dry Dry Ruins would have been much more appropriate, since that one at the very least is a special cup track. Based on what we knew, there was probably only going to be one special cup track in the final wave, so adding another Star Cup track on top of that just felt odd. And don't get me wrong, I'm still happy Daisy Circuit is here, and I still really enjoy the track. The shortcut through the building is fun, I love the seaside sunset aesthetic, and even more minor aspects of the track like the raised sidewalk give it a very unique feel. Daisy Circuit is a victim of bad timing, and I think it would have been a more hype inclusion had it shown up in an earlier wave. When it comes down to it, I personally don't think Pipeline should have died for this track. Going off of that though, after the Daisy Circuit reveal, I did get the suspicion that there was a missing piece of the puzzle. Why would Nintendo reveal the mystery track of the final wave if otherwise we pretty much knew exactly what tracks were going to be included? It just didn't make sense, and I was developing my own theories about how they could potentially subvert expectations one last time. My personal theory, and the only possibility that made sense to me based on the information we had at the time, was that the SNES course would be replaced with a certain alternative from the GBA, whose appearance in Tour just so happened to share a lot in common with the Tour appearance of the other Wii track that we'll get into later. What I, and most others, didn't account for though, was the possibility of a single Tour track not making the cut. So when the Wave 6 trailer dropped and the final track shown was 3DS Rosalina's Ice World, you can imagine I was pretty damn surprised. Now this was a track I had actually been expecting to take the Wave 6 mystery slot, so even with Pipeline gone, I'm still very happy to see it. More 3DS representation is always welcome in my eyes, and this one is actually a special cup track. I swear, it would have been hella weird if Wave 3 of all waves had more special cup representation than the final wave. Instead, we tied. Ice World is a really solid pick for this wave too. Of course, there are ice physics, and combining that with some relatively tight segments make for a solid challenge of a track to include in the Spiny Cup specifically. I also really like the additions made for this version, like the new shortcut at the end, as well as the addition of half pipes, which felt like such an easy match for this track that I'm surprised they weren't added in the Tour version first. I feel like this and Daisy Circuit are both relatively controversial picks that kinda bring down Wave 6 for many, but I think Ice World at the very least deserves its spot in this wave. I can't say shit about Daisy Circuit though, Pipeline got robbed. The final three tracks I have to talk about get a much warmer reception as a whole. DK Melon is the first of these. Now, for most of the BCP, I was rooting for Dino Dino Jungle over it. It's my opinion that the 3DS Lightning Cup is one of the best cups in the entire series, so the more we could get from it, the better. That, and I always thought of Dino Dino Jungle as being just a bit more interesting and dynamic, since over time I got to the point of seeing DK Melon as just getting shot up a cannon, driving on the straightaway, doing a couple U-turns, and then finishing. I always liked DK Summit better anyways, so if we got that and no DK Melon, I wasn't going to be upset. Now, I don't know what it is about this version of DK Mountain, but it reignited my love for this track in a way I never expected. While I do still prefer Dino Dino Jungle as a whole, this version of DK Mountain reminded me of its appeal all over again, and in a lot of ways, Mario Kart 8 now has what I see as the definitive version of the track. Of course, this game isn't nearly as loose, bouncy, and or chaotic as Double Dash and Wii from a driving perspective, so in that sense, I don't exactly see this version as a full-on replacement, like I see tracks like Waluigi Stadium as in this game. This does fix a lot of my old complaints with the track though. In Mario Kart Wii and Tour, for instance, there are wooden ramps tacked onto the ledges of the mountain to trick off of, which always felt hella out of place. Now, that is rectified and the edges are stone all the way through again, while also still being trickable. As for a change I didn't know I needed, one of those ledges on the stone face of the mountain now has a few DK barrels added, which both works as an obstacle to avoid during the straightaway, as well as something that adds to the overall Donkey Kong theming of the track. The bridge at the end is extra wavy now too, allowing for some trick opportunities there, while also giving players a reason to be at the side of the bridge, which could put them at risk of being knocked off. DK Mountain is a fan favorite that I am thrilled to have seen show up in Wave 6, and combining the changes I talked about with the fact that the gap jump is still possible, you have a standout track for both this wave and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe overall. Now, while I would have liked to have talked about the whole mystery slot / pipeline cut situation at the end, I just couldn't have done it in good faith. Instead, I wanted to save the last two tracks of this wave for the end, since I think they collectively make up the perfect finale both for the Booster Course Pass and Mario Kart 8 overall. With the traditional formula, a Mario Kart game famously ends its Nitro selection with two specific tracks, a Bowser's Castle and a Rainbow Road. So when SNES Bowser Castle 3 was revealed for Tour, making it very clear that it would be the final SNES slot for the Booster Course Pass, I became very hopeful that it would get pushed back out of Wave 5 into Wave 6 in order to make the Spiny Cup end in that exact same way. As it turns out, I was right on the money, and we ended up ending the BCP with the Bowser's Castle track from the first game in the series, and the most recent Rainbow Road that wasn't already in 8 Deluxe, which, if you ask me, that is just perfect. Starting off with Bowser Castle 3, this one finally does something I wanted SNES track remakes to do for a long time, which is giving them the full GBA treatment and reimagining them with elevation changes that were impossible due to the original game's flat nature. Instead of being in a lava-filled room inside of Bowser's Castle, you are now racing up and down a sort of lava dam just outside, which is such a cool change of scenery that gives this track a feel unlike any other Bowser's Castle in the series. All of the changes from the Tour version are here, with the bone piranha plants at the end and the 3-lane section letting you race on the dividing walls if you're skilled enough. There's even a couple changes with the thwomps, with the one in the beginning hallway removed, and 2 new ones added at the final jump that are placed in such a way that they function in reverse to how they usually do in Mario Kart tracks. Which, I don't know, that shit's just so fucking cool and creative, and just, it adds on to how special this remake already is. Not to mention the absolute banger of a remix the music got. Like, listen to this shit. I genuinely cannot believe a SNES course got this big of a glow up. It's insane. It's especially funny putting this track side by side with Mario Circuit 3. Like, again, I get Mario Circuit 3 was probably intentionally going for a retro feel, but it's hard to believe these two tracks come from the same DLC. Now, though, it's time for the grand finale of the Booster Course Pass, and easily one of the most anticipated tracks at that. When Wave 1 dropped and we got the prefix data mine, we saw that, at least at that point, the final track of the BCP was going to be a Wii track. Gee, I wonder what track they would end the final cup of a Mario Kart game with. Yeah, so the roughly year and a half between Waves 1 and 6 was very interesting, especially in regards to this track. Things just kept on lining up for its inclusion, up until the beginning of 2023 when it was added to Tour, which basically solidified it at that point. I think the inclusions of Moonview and Daisy Circuit were partially meant to throw us off the scent, because many people were quick to assume that those tracks being included meant that this track was cut. Nevertheless, it prevailed, and We Rainbow Road is the final track of the Booster Course Pass, as it was always meant to be. The Rainbow Road picks and the Booster Course Pass were both perfect. 3DS and Wii are probably the two biggest fan favorite Rainbow Roads. 3DS is known for its variety in scenery and being a one-lapper, while Wii is known as one of the toughest Rainbow Roads in the series, which made it particularly perfect for the Spiny Cup. Just about everything you could want is here. The gap jump is back, which is a very common statement for me to make about Booster Course Pass tracks, as I'm now realizing. Hell, even Nintendo realizes this, because they showed this shortcut being pulled off in the Wave 6 trailer itself. Aside from that, this course is fully an anti-grav, which can genuinely fuck you up sometimes if someone bumps into you on one of the sharper turns. More importantly, you still burn alive when you fall off the track! Woo! I was really hoping they would find a way to make this work even with the way Lakitu works in 8, so I was very stoked to see this detail return. Also, pretty much all of the drawbacks with the Tour version are fixed. You can trick over the big holes in the track again, the course is 3 laps after being turned into a one-lapper in Tour, and even minor things like the road not being bright and pastel in Tour are fixed to give the track the same feel it originally had. I am a tiny bit sad that certain parts of the track retained their railings that were added in Tour, but honestly those were comparably easier turns anyway, so it's not really that huge of a deal. I genuinely cannot think of a more perfect way for them to have ended the Booster Course Pass than this track, and considering it was the main track shown off in the Wave 6 trailer, I think Nintendo themselves absolutely knew that too. Moving on to the Wave 6 update as a whole, this one was actually hella stacked. Of course, we have the characters, which alone brought their own surprises. It seemed very odd that Wave 5 had 3 characters, when it seemed that afterwards there were only 2 characters left to add in Wave 6. I had my own suspicions about this though, but chose to stick to the idea that only 2 remained so as not to get my hopes up too high. During the next few months, speculation on the characters was narrowed down to 3 key faces: Diddy Kong, Pauline, and Funky Kong. All are in Tour, and very solid arguments were made for each. Diddy Kong was basically the last character needed to make the Mario Kart 8 roster feel complete, so he felt like a lock. Pauline has been getting added to basically all of the Mario sports games during the Switch era, so her inclusion made too much sense. Funky is a major fan favorite racer, and with him being in Tour, it felt like it was finally time for him to appear in a console Mario Kart game again. All 3 of these characters felt like they could have been shoo-ins, and it was impossible to predict which one wouldn't make the cut. Which is why they all did. Yeah, so alongside Daisy Circuit, the Direct revealed the characters for this wave, and their asses were so fucking cheeky about it too. They were giving little to no room to breathe between the lines the announcer was reading at first, but then after Funky was shown, he stops talking for a few seconds, and then reveals Pauline. Like, they ain't slick, they knew exactly what the fuck they were doing. Oh yeah, Peach Head is here too. Okay. Nah, but seriously, I do think it's cool that Pauline and Peachette were both added, because they were the only high-end drivers at Tour's launch that weren't already in Mario Kart 8, so it's a neat little full circle thing at this point. Considering we thought we were only getting 2 characters in Wave 6, there's nothing really to complain about with their inclusion for real. That's not all though. The Wave 6 update came with 2 really awesome surprises. The first is that a handful of Mii suits from Tour were being brought into the game, which thank God, because they added so many unique new Mii suits to Tour during its last year or so, and it would have been such a shame to have all of them locked away there. Though I am still sad the Dry Bones one didn't make the cut. Maybe in the next game. The other surprise is my personal favorite, being us finally getting a music menu. With how the music was done in this game, all of the tracks being recorded on live instruments, including the retro tracks getting re recorded with the same treatment, it always felt criminal that we never got a music player. While I do wish there were a couple more features with it, like maybe having the player automatically cycle through variants of tracks with dynamic music changes, I am still beyond happy to finally have this feature. There's also a new end credit sequence made for the Booster Course Pass specifically, which was the perfect way to cap off both the DLC and even Tour to some extent, since the medley is entirely comprised of Tour track themes. Yes, Sky High Sunday counts. Come on now. It's a neat little final touch to the DLC, and I really appreciate them putting it together. Anyway, though, that's pretty much it for Wave 6. They definitely ended the Booster Course Pass with a bang, and while my personal hype was at its peak with Wave 5, I still really appreciate Wave 6 for what it is, and am still happy to have these tracks in the game. This video can be used as a retroactive into this BCP recap series I started, so if you're watching in that order, I really appreciate you coming along for this series, and I hope I was able to at least give somewhat of a new perspective on these tracks. Even for the questionable inclusions, I still appreciate them being here and have had a blast racing on them. Considering a couple years ago I was starved for any console Mario Kart content at all, I'll take what I can get. If you're watching the series in release order, though, you can join me next time when I talk about Wave 3, the cap off for the first year of the BCP. Until then, I'll see y'all later. Bye! It definitely has a very unique feel to it, like a lot of the latter sit. What the fuck is that? Did I just get hella auto corrected during all of this? What the fuck? It definitely has a very unique feel to it that a lot of the later city tracks do. And wait, what? Holy hell, God, I feel lightheaded.